Hey, stop scrolling for a second. Because what I'm about to tell you actually happened to a family not far from where you might be sitting right now. A woman in a blue dress ran down a quiet street clutching a bag of cash to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Not because she was scared for her life, but because she'd just been caught. And the person chasing her down wasn't a police officer. It wasn't even a family member. It was the maid. The woman everyone in that house had ignored for 3 years. What she uncovered that night would destroy a wedding, expose a lie that had been building for months, and change one man's life forever. Stay with me because this story gets unbelievable. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop your country in the comments. I love seeing how many of you tune in from all over the world. Today's story is one of the most emotional and twist-filled ones we've ever told. A story about love, betrayal, loyalty, and the quiet strength of someone nobody ever noticed. It's the kind of story that reminds us the people we overlook are sometimes the ones who save us. Stick around till the end, because this one has a turn you will not see coming. Nobody in that house ever really looked at Maria Contreras. She arrived every morning at 6, let herself in through the side door with her own key, and by the time Daniel Whitfield woke up, the smell of fresh coffee was already drifting up the staircase of his hillside home in Pasadena, California. She had worked for the Whitfield family for 11 years, first for Daniel's mother, and after she passed, for Daniel himself. She knew which floorboard creaked outside his office. She knew he took his eggs soft, not hard. She knew the sound of his laugh when it was real, and the sound of it when it wasn't. What she didn't know, not at first, was that the woman he was about to marry had a laugh that was never real at all. Daniel was 36, the kind of successful that didn't come from luck, but from 20 years of waking up before the sun and refusing to quit. He'd built a mid-sized logistics company from a single delivery van into a fleet of over 200 trucks stretching across 3 states. He wasn't flashy about it. He drove the same silver truck he bought used a decade ago, and the only real indulgence he allowed himself was the house on the hill, the one his mother had always dreamed of, the one he bought her before she got too sick to enjoy it, and the one he now lived in alone. Alone, until Vanessa Reyes walked into his life at a charity gala 18 months ago. She was beautiful in the kind of way that made rooms go quiet. She wore confidence like other people wore perfume. You noticed it before you noticed anything else about her. She told him she worked in marketing for a boutique firm downtown, that she'd grown up in Ohio, that she believed in old-fashioned love, the kind that lasted. Daniel, who had spent so many years building something that he'd forgotten to build a life alongside it, fell for her the way a man falls when he's been lonely longer than he's admitted to himself. Maria didn't trust her from the first week. It wasn't anything Vanessa said. It was the way she said it, sweet in front of Daniel, sharp the second his back was turned. Make sure the towels in the guest bath are the white ones, not the cream ones. I don't care what he says looks fine. She'd snapped at Maria one afternoon while Daniel was on a work call 2 rooms away. Small things. A tone here. An eye roll there. The way she spoke to Maria like furniture that happened to move. Maria said nothing. She had learned long ago that being underestimated was sometimes the safest place to stand. She kept working. She kept watching. 6 months into the relationship, small things started disappearing. A pair of cufflinks that had belonged to Daniel's father. Cash from the drawer in his office that he kept for the landscapers. Nothing large enough to report, nothing that couldn't be explained away. "Oh, I think I saw the gardener near your desk," Vanessa would say, so smoothly that Daniel never once thought to question her. Maria noticed. Maria always noticed. But when she gently mentioned to Daniel one evening that she'd seen Vanessa going through his desk drawers while he was at the gym, he only smiled the tired smile of a man in love and said, "She's probably just looking for a pen, Maria. You don't have to worry about her." That was the moment Maria understood something important. In that house, love had made the smartest man she knew completely blind. By the time the engagement was announced, a ring with a stone large enough to catch the whole California sun, Vanessa had already stopped pretending to be gentle with the staff. She fired the landscaper Daniel had used for 15 years because he looked at her wrong. She rearranged the entire kitchen without asking, then complained when Maria couldn't find things fast enough. She began referring to the house in front of guests as my home, even though her name wasn't on a single document. Maria kept a small notebook in the pocket of her apron. She never told anyone why. She simply wrote dates, times, things that didn't add up. A receipt from a jewelry store for a piece Daniel never gave her. A phone call Vanessa took out on the back terrace, her voice dropping to a whisper the moment she noticed Maria near the sliding door. A name Maria heard once, Marcus, spoken with a familiarity that a woman engaged to someone else should never have in her voice. It was 3 weeks before the wedding when Maria first saw the folder. She was cleaning the office, the one room in the house Daniel trusted no one to touch but her, when she noticed the safe behind the bookshelf was slightly ajar. Daniel never left it open, not once in 11 years. Her hands paused on the duster. She should have closed it and walked away. She told herself that later, many times. Instead, she looked inside, and what she found there was the beginning of something that would end with a woman in a blue dress running down a quiet street, clutching a bag that was never hers to hold, while the maid nobody noticed ran after her, faster than anyone in that neighborhood had ever seen her move. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Because what Maria found in that safe wasn't the twist. It was only the first thread of it. And when she pulled on it, everything Daniel Whitfield believed about the woman he was about to marry began to unravel, one lie at a time. The folder was thin, tucked behind a stack of insurance papers, and it didn't belong to Daniel. Maria recognized the handwriting on the tab immediately, sharp, slanted letters that spelled out VR, personal. She'd seen that handwriting on grocery lists left carelessly on the kitchen counter. It was Vanessa's. Inside were bank statements, not Daniel's, a separate account, opened 8 months earlier, under Vanessa's name alone. Maria didn't understand every line of it. She wasn't a financial expert, but she understood enough. Deposits. Regular ones. Round numbers. 2,000 here, 3,000 there. Moving from an account Maria didn't recognize into this hidden one. And beneath the statements, a printed itinerary. A one-way flight to Cancun, dated exactly 9 days after the wedding. One way. Maria's hands trembled as she read it a second time, then a third, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less terrible. But they didn't. There was also a note, handwritten, folded into quarters. She almost didn't read it. She told herself later that not reading it would have been the right thing to do, the professional thing, the thing that kept her safely inside the lines of just the help. But 11 years in that house had made her more than help. It had made her someone who cared whether the man upstairs, still whistling as he shaved for a dinner date that evening, was about to walk into a disaster with his eyes wide shut and his heart wide open. She unfolded the note. Once the joint accounts open after the wedding, it won't take long. He trusts me with everything already. Marcus, we just need to hold on a little longer. I know this has been hard, but soon we'll have enough to disappear for good. I promise you it's almost over. Maria sat down slowly on the edge of Daniel's leather office chair, the note still in her hand, and for a long moment she simply stared at the bookshelf across the room, at the framed photograph of Daniel's mother that still sat there, smiling out at a room she'd never see her son's wedding happen in. She thought about walking straight to Daniel that instant. She thought about it hard. But she also knew Daniel, knew that a man in love, shown evidence by the maid, might not believe it. Vanessa was clever. She had an answer for everything, a way of turning even Maria's honest concern into something that sounded like jealousy, like overstepping, like a woman who'd worked in that house too long and had started imagining herself as family. Maria had watched Vanessa do it before, in smaller ways. She could imagine exactly how it would go, Vanessa's eyes filling with practiced tears, her hand finding Daniel's arm, her voice soft and wounded. "Baby, I found that folder in a drawer. I was going to ask you about it. I think someone is trying to make me look bad. Is this Maria? Has she done this before?" No. If Maria was going to do this, she needed more than a note in a folder. She needed proof so solid that not even the softest voice in the world could talk her way out of it. So Maria did something she had never done in 11 years working for that family. She put the folder back exactly as she found it, closed the safe until it clicked, and walked out of that office like nothing in the world had happened. And then, for the first time since Daniel's mother passed away, Maria Contreras began keeping a secret bigger than herself. Over the following 2 weeks, she watched more carefully than she ever had. She noted every time Vanessa left the house to run errands that took 3 hours for a task that should have taken 30 minutes. She noted the new phone Vanessa kept in her purse, separate from the one she used in front of Daniel. The screen always turned face down on the counter, always buzzing at odd hours. She noted the wedding planner's comment, overheard in passing, about how Vanessa had insisted the final vendor payments, nearly $40,000, be wired to an account for tax purposes, an account that Maria would later learn had nothing to do with any vendor at all. She noted, most of all, the calendar. The wedding was set for a Saturday. Vanessa's flight was for the following Monday, a full week after the ceremony, giving her exactly enough time for the joint accounts to open, for the wire transfers to clear, for the last of the wedding gift envelopes to be collected and quietly emptied before anyone noticed a single dollar missing. Maria understood, with a chill that settled into her chest and refused to leave, that this wasn't a woman falling out of love. This was a plan. A long, patient, carefully built plan, and Daniel, kind, hardworking, trusting Daniel, was nothing more to Vanessa than a very well-funded exit strategy. 10 days before the wedding, Maria finally decided she couldn't wait for absolute proof any longer. She would go to Daniel that weekend, with everything she had, and pray that 11 years of trust would be enough to make him listen. But she never got the chance. Because 4 days before the wedding, everything Maria had been quietly documenting exploded into the open, not because of anything she did, but because Vanessa made a mistake. A small one. The kind of mistake that, in stories like this, always seems to come at exactly the moment it can do the most damage. And what happened next was something not one person in that house, not Daniel, not the wedding planner, not even Maria herself, ever imagined. It happened on a Tuesday evening, the kind of ordinary evening that gives no warning of the earthquake about to hit it. Daniel had come home early, exhausted from a week of finalizing wedding logistics on top of running his company, and decided to surprise Vanessa by picking up her favorite Thai food from the place downtown she always raved about. He wanted, just for one night, to feel like an ordinary man doing something small and kind for the woman he loved, not a man buried under spreadsheets and seating charts. He let himself in through the garage, the food bags rustling in his hands, and heard Vanessa's voice drifting from the sunroom, low and urgent, the tone she used only on that second phone. He almost called out to announce himself. Almost. But something in her voice made him pause at the hallway corner instead. Not suspicion exactly, just an instinct, the kind that lives quietly in every person who has ever sensed something wrong before they could name it. I told you, Marcus, for more days. 4. The wire clears the morning after the wedding. And then we're gone. I can't keep doing this back and forth. It's driving me crazy. He still thinks the honeymoon is Hawaii. I told the travel agent to book Cancun under a different name, so there's no paper trail on his card. Just trust me, baby. This is the last time I'll ever have to pretend to love someone I can't stand. The bags of Thai food slipped from Daniel's hands and hit the marble floor with a sound loud enough to end a life he thought he understood. Vanessa appeared in the hallway a second later, phone still in hand, her face doing something Daniel had never seen it do before, not soft, not warm, not performing at all. For one unguarded second, before she could rebuild the mask, he saw exactly what had been underneath it the entire time. Calculation, contempt, and something close to relief, the relief of a person who has been carrying a heavy lie and, for one terrible moment, is almost glad it's finally been dropped. Daniel, she started, and her voice instantly softened, instantly found its practiced tremble. It's not what it sounded like, I swear that was. Who is Marcus? Daniel's voice came out flat, quieter than she expected, which frightened her more than shouting would have. He's my cousin. He's going through a divorce. I was just. You said honeymoon. You said wire. You said pretend. The silence that followed said everything neither of them could. For a long moment, Vanessa simply looked at him, calculating. Maria, who had come rushing from the kitchen at the sound of the crash, could see it from the doorway, the exact moment Vanessa decided which version of herself to become. Not the crying fiancée. Not the wounded innocent. She straightened her spine instead, and something colder settled over her face. "You weren't supposed to hear that," she said simply, almost bored, as if the only real crime was Daniel's bad timing. "But since you did, yes. There's no cousin. There's no divorce. There's Marcus, and there's a plan, and honestly, Daniel, it would have gone so much smoother for both of us if you'd just enjoyed the wedding and let me have this." "Let you have what?" His voice cracked on the last word, 11 years of careful, hard-working life suddenly feeling very small in his own house. "Everything you never once thought to protect," she said, and for the first time, Maria saw genuine anger flash across the woman's face, not guilt, anger, as though being caught was the injustice, not the plan itself. "Your account's open to me the day we marry. Every dollar you've spent building this perfect little empire, and you never even asked me for a prenup, because you trusted me. That's on you, Daniel. Not me." Daniel stood frozen, and Maria, who had spent 2 weeks quietly gathering evidence, who had a folder of her own now, copied in secret, hidden inside her sewing bag at home, stepped forward for the first time in 11 years and spoke directly, without permission, without hesitation. "She's been taking money for months," Maria said, her voice steady even though her heart was pounding hard enough to hear. "Small amounts from the office drawer, from your wallet. There's a separate account. There's a flight booked for 9 days after the wedding, one way, to Cancun under a different name. I found it in the safe 3 weeks ago. I didn't tell you, because I didn't think you'd believe me over her." The room went completely silent. Vanessa's eyes snapped to Maria with a look so sharp it could have drawn blood. "You went through my things?" she hissed, momentarily forgetting Daniel was even standing there. "You spied on me? You're the maid." "I clean this house," Maria said quietly. "I don't clean up your lies. Not anymore." And that was the moment Vanessa understood the plan she'd spent 8 careful months building had just collapsed in a hallway that smelled like spilled pad thai, 4 days before it was supposed to pay off completely. She did the only thing left to do. She ran. She didn't run out the front door. That would have meant losing time fumbling with the alarm code Daniel would surely change within the hour. She ran through the kitchen instead, straight past Maria, and grabbed the one thing she refused to leave behind, her handbag, sitting on the counter where she'd left it that morning, already holding nearly $11,000 in cash she'd been slowly, carefully withdrawing over the past 3 weeks in amounts small enough not to trigger a bank alert. It wasn't the fortune she'd planned for. It wasn't the wedding gift envelopes, the joint accounts, the years of quiet siphoning she'd hoped to complete. But it was something, and something was better than walking out with nothing. Daniel stood in the hallway, still too stunned to move, staring at the shattered container of pad thai spreading across his mother's marble floor. But Maria moved. She wasn't thinking about her job, or her age, or the fact that chasing a woman down a residential street in Pasadena was not remotely part of any job description she'd ever agreed to. She was thinking about 11 years of loyalty to a family who had never had anyone truly protecting them, about a mother who had trusted Maria with her son before she passed, and about the simple, burning unfairness of watching someone try to steal a good man's entire life and walk away clean. "Vanessa!" Maria shouted, already moving toward the door. Vanessa didn't stop. She burst through the side entrance into the golden light of early evening, her heels slapping against the driveway before she kicked them off entirely and ran barefoot down the sloped street in her blue dress, the handbag clutched tight against her chest like it held her entire future, because, in her mind, it did. What Vanessa didn't know was that the Ramirez family 2 doors down had just pulled into their driveway in their black SUV, home from picking up their daughter from soccer practice. Elena Ramirez, behind the wheel, saw a woman sprinting barefoot down the street clutching a bag, and a moment later saw Maria, a woman she'd waved to 100 times over the years, always kind, always calm, running after her, shouting something Elena couldn't quite make out. Maria didn't ask permission. She simply banged on the passenger window as she passed, breathless, and shouted words that would later become the most repeated line in the whole neighborhood. She's stealing from the Whitfields. Please help me stop her. Elena didn't hesitate. She'd known Daniel Whitfield for 6 years, had brought him a casserole the week his mother passed, had watched this entire engagement unfold from her front porch with a slowly growing unease she'd never voiced out loud. She threw the SUV into drive and pulled out after Vanessa, rolling slowly alongside her, Maria now running full speed on the sidewalk just behind. "Vanessa, stop!" Maria shouted again, lungs burning, years of climbing stairs and carrying groceries finally paying off in a way she never imagined they would. Vanessa didn't stop. She cut across a neighbor's lawn, nearly tripping over a garden hose, glancing back with wild, panicked eyes at the two women, the maid and the neighbor, closing in on her from both sides. For a moment, it must have felt to her like the entire street had turned against her, every quiet judgment anyone had ever silently made about her finally rising up all at once. It was Elena who made the final move. She swung the SUV gently but decisively into the road ahead, angling it just enough to block the sidewalk's natural path onto the main street, the street that led, eventually, toward the freeway, toward an easy escape into the anonymity of Los Angeles traffic. Vanessa skidded to a stop, chest heaving, trapped between a parked car, a hedge, and Maria, who finally caught up to her, breathless but standing tall. For a long moment, neither woman said anything. The golden light of sunset caught the tears streaking down Vanessa's face, real ones this time, Maria noted, not the practiced kind she'd seen so many times before. Fear did that to people. It stripped away all the performance and left only the truth underneath. "Please," Vanessa said quietly, clutching the bag tighter. "Please, just let me go. You don't understand what I've been through, what he doesn't know about me." "I understand you were about to marry a man who trusted you completely," Maria said, "and steal everything he'd worked for. That, I understand perfectly." Behind them, a second car pulled up, Daniel's silver truck, driven not by Daniel but by the wedding planner, Carol, who had been arriving for a final walk-through appointment just as the chaos spilled into the street, and who had immediately called Daniel the moment she saw what was happening. Daniel himself arrived moments later on foot, having run the 4 blocks barefoot, still in his work shirt, his face a mixture of heartbreak and disbelief that no amount of money could have prepared him for. He stopped a few feet away, looking at the woman he had planned to marry in 4 days, standing barefoot in the street, clutching a bag of stolen cash, cornered by his housekeeper and his neighbor. "Was any of it real?" he asked quietly. "Not angry, just tired." "So tired." Vanessa didn't answer, and in her silence, Daniel finally got the only honest response she had ever given him in 18 months. The police arrived 20 minutes later, called not by Daniel, who stood frozen, still processing the collapse of the life he thought he was about to start, but by Elena, who calmly explained the situation to the dispatcher while Maria kept a steady hand on Vanessa's arm, not aggressively, just firmly enough to make clear that running again would accomplish nothing. Vanessa didn't resist. Something in her had gone quiet and hollow the moment she realized the street was blocked on both sides, that there was truly nowhere left to run. She sat down on the curb, the blue dress pooling around her, and stared at the handbag in her lap as though it were the only thing left in the world that still made sense. When the officers arrived, Daniel gave his statement in a voice that kept catching, like a man reading words in a language he was only just learning. Maria gave hers with the calm precision of someone who had spent 2 weeks preparing for exactly this moment, even though she'd never truly believed it would happen on a public street with neighbors gathering on their porches to watch. It turned out the $11,000 in Vanessa's bag was only the surface of it. Over the following days, as Daniel worked with his lawyer and, eventually, with detectives assigned to the case, a much larger picture emerged. Vanessa Reyes was not, in fact, from Ohio. She had grown up in Nevada, and this was not her first engagement built on the same pattern. Court records, once pulled, revealed a broken engagement 3 years earlier in Arizona, and before that, a fraud complaint in Texas that had quietly gone nowhere for lack of evidence. Marcus, the man on the other end of that second phone, was not her cousin. He was her actual boyfriend of nearly 4 years, a man she had never once stopped seeing throughout her entire relationship with Daniel, a partner not in romance, but in exactly this kind of long, patient con. Daniel sat in his lawyer's office 3 days after the incident, staring at a folder that laid out, in cold black and white, exactly how close he had come to losing not just money, but the house his mother had loved, the company he'd spent 20 years building, and very possibly far more than that if the plan had continued past the wedding day. His lawyer, a woman named Patricia, who had handled his mother's estate years before, looked at him with something between professional concern and genuine sympathy. "You're one of the lucky ones, Daniel," she said gently. "Most people don't find out until it's already too late. Most people don't have someone in their corner who is paying close enough attention to catch it in time." Daniel didn't answer right away. His mind kept drifting back to the street, to the sight of Maria, quiet, steady Maria, who had brought him coffee every morning for 11 years and never once asked for anything beyond her wages, sprinting barefoot adjacent down a residential road after a woman twice her speed, refusing to let her get away with what she'd tried to do. "She could have just told me and let it be my problem," Daniel finally said. "She didn't have to run after her. She didn't have to get involved at all." Patricia smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Some people involve themselves anyway, Daniel, because they care more than their job requires them to." That evening, Daniel drove home to a house that felt different than it had 4 days earlier. Quieter, but not in the peaceful way it used to be. He found Maria in the kitchen, exactly where she always was at that hour, wiping down counters that were already clean, the way people do when their hands need something to hold on to and their minds need something simple to focus on. "Maria," he said, standing in the doorway. "Sit down with me for a minute, please." She hesitated. 11 years of professional boundaries don't dissolve in a single week, no matter what's happened. But she untied her apron and sat across from him at the kitchen island where he had eaten breakfast alone for the better part of a decade. "How long did you know?" he asked. "About 3 weeks for certain," she said. "Suspicious for closer to 6 months. And you didn't tell me." "I tried to once, in a small way." "You didn't hear me." "Not really. I don't blame you for that. She was very good at what she did. I decided I needed proof strong enough that you couldn't explain it away, even to yourself. I was going to bring it to you this weekend. I ran out of time." Daniel nodded slowly, turning his coffee mug in small circles on the counter. "Why didn't you just call the police the moment you found that folder? Why keep watching, keep waiting?" Maria considered the question for a long moment, choosing her words carefully, the way she always did. "Because I've worked for this family a long time, Mr. Whitfield. Your mother trusted me with more than dusting shelves. She trusted me to look after this house, and after she passed, I suppose some part of me decided that meant looking after you too. I couldn't prove it fast enough to stop the wedding through paperwork alone. So when it came down to it on that street, I did the only thing I could do in the moment. I ran." Daniel looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years, seeing not the woman who managed his household quietly in the background of his busy life, but the person who had, in the truest sense, saved him. "I don't know how to thank you for something like this," he said quietly. "You don't have to thank me," Maria said. "Just don't stop noticing people, Daniel. That's the only thing I'd ask." The weeks that followed were some of the strangest of Daniel Whitfield's life, a strange, disorienting mixture of grief for a future he believed in and relief for a disaster he'd narrowly escaped. He canceled the wedding venue, absorbing the deposit loss without complaint, grateful it was the only price he had to pay. He returned the ring to the jeweler, who, upon hearing a condensed version of the story, quietly refunded more than the store's policy technically allowed. Word moved through his social circle the way word always does in small, wealthy communities, quietly at first, then all at once, until Daniel found himself receiving calls from people he barely knew, all wanting to hear the story about the maid who chased down the runaway bride. He hated the way people said it at first, like it was gossip, like it was entertainment, rather than the most frightening and clarifying week of his life. But slowly, he began to understand that people weren't laughing at him. They were amazed, genuinely amazed by a detail of the story that kept surfacing in every retelling, that it wasn't a private investigator or a suspicious best friend, or even Daniel's own instincts that had caught the con in time. It was the housekeeper. The person almost everyone in that world had been trained, by habit and privilege, not to really see. Maria, for her part, tried to keep life as normal as possible. She still arrived at 6 every morning. She still made the coffee, still remembered how Daniel liked his eggs, still quietly kept the house running the way she had for over a decade. But something between them had shifted in a way neither of them tried to name out loud. Daniel began asking her opinion on things he never used to think to ask: which contractor to trust for the kitchen renovation he was finally doing, whether a particular business partner felt right to her, whether she thought he should sell the house or keep it. "You've been reading people longer than I have," he told her once, half joking, half serious. "Might as well use that." Maria, who had spent 11 years learning to stay quietly in the background, found this new visibility uncomfortable at first, then, slowly, something closer to meaningful. She had a daughter, Sophia, 22 years old, finishing her final year of nursing school at a community college across town, working nights at a diner to help cover tuition her scholarships didn't fully stretch to cover. Maria had never once mentioned Sophia's tuition struggles to Daniel in 11 years of working for his family. It wasn't her place, she'd always believed, to bring her own burdens into someone else's home. It was Daniel who found out, almost by accident, when Maria mentioned needing to leave 20 minutes early one Thursday to pick up Sophia from a shift that had run long, her car once again refusing to start reliably. Daniel, sitting at his kitchen island reviewing quarterly numbers for his company, looked up and asked a simple question that would end up changing more than he realized in the moment. "What does Sophia want to do, once she's done with school?" "Pediatric nursing," Maria said. "Children's hospital, if she can manage it. She's wanted it since she was small. Her little cousin was sick for a long time, and the nurses were kind to her in a way she never forgot." Daniel nodded slowly, something turning over in his mind, though he said nothing further that day. Meanwhile, the legal case against Vanessa moved forward with the slow, grinding pace of the justice system. Investigators found that she and Marcus had run a similar scheme on at least 2 other men before Daniel, one in Scottsdale, Arizona, one in Austin, Texas. Though in both prior cases, the men had discovered the fraud too late to fully recover their losses, and neither had pressed charges, embarrassed, Daniel imagined, by how deeply they'd been fooled. He understood that feeling more than he wanted to admit. He almost let his own embarrassment stop him from pressing charges too. Almost. It was, again, Maria who gently pushed him past it, not with pressure, but with a single quiet observation over morning coffee. "If you don't stop her, Mr. Whitfield, she does this again to someone else. Maybe someone without a Maria in their kitchen." Daniel pressed charges. The case for grand theft and attempted fraud moved forward, slow but steady, and though Marcus fled the state before he could be located, Vanessa was formally charged, released on bail with an ankle monitor, awaiting a trial date still months away. But something else was happening quietly underneath all of this, something Daniel hadn't expected. In the process of untangling his finances, reviewing every account Vanessa had touched, cross-referencing every transaction with his accountant, Daniel discovered something Maria had never told him, something that had nothing to do with Vanessa at all. 11 years earlier, when Daniel's mother had first hired Maria, she had done so under unusual circumstances. Circumstances Daniel, only 25 at the time and deep in the early grind of building his company, had never fully known about. And what he uncovered about that history was about to become the second, quieter twist of this entire story. It started with an old file his mother's estate attorney had kept, one Daniel had never bothered to fully review, buried among decades of paperwork he inherited after her passing and had simply never had the emotional bandwidth to sort through. Going through his finances in the aftermath of the Vanessa situation meant, inevitably, going through everything: old accounts, old records, old decisions his mother had made long before Daniel ever paid attention to the family's finances himself. Inside that file was a short letter, handwritten in his mother's careful cursive, dated almost 12 years earlier, the year before Maria was hired. "To whoever handles this after me, if anything ever happens to me, make sure Maria Contreras and her daughter are looked after. She saved my life once, in a way most people never will for a stranger, and I intend to spend whatever years I have left making sure she never has to worry the way I once did." Daniel sat with that letter for a long time, utterly still, before he called Maria into the office, not out of suspicion this time, but out of a growing need to finally understand. Maria, when asked, was quiet for a long moment before she answered, the way people are quiet when a memory they've carried alone for years is finally being asked of them out loud. "Your mother had a heart attack," she said slowly. 12 years ago, before I ever worked for her. I was a stranger to her then. I cleaned offices downtown, including the building where she used to volunteer at a community clinic on weekends. I found her collapsed in a stairwell one evening after everyone else had already left for the day. I didn't have a phone that worked reliably back then, Mr. Whitfield. I ran 2 blocks to the fire station myself because it was faster than trying to find a working payphone. I stayed with her until the ambulance arrived. That's all. I never expected anything from it. I didn't even know her name until she thanked me from her hospital bed a week later." Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. "She never told me that story. She wasn't the type to make a show of gratitude," Maria said. "But she found me a few months later, tracked me down through the clinic, and offered me a job in her home. I said yes because I needed the work and because she was kind to me in a way most people in that world never were to someone who cleaned floors for a living. I didn't know, until you just told me, that there was ever a letter like that." Daniel looked down at his mother's handwriting again, feeling the full weight of a debt he'd never known existed, a debt his mother had clearly intended to repay slowly, quietly, over years, the same patient way she did everything, only for her illness to take her before she ever got the chance to fully see it through. "She would want me to finish what she started," Daniel said quietly. Maria shook her head immediately, the way she always did whenever anything came too close to feeling like charity. "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Whitfield. What I did for your mother was a long time ago, and what I did last week I did because it was right, not because I was owed." "I know," Daniel said. "That's exactly why I want to do this." 2 weeks later, Daniel sat down with Maria again, this time with a folder of his own, not evidence of a crime, but the opposite. A full scholarship fund, fully covering Sophia's remaining tuition and clinical fees through the end of her nursing program, set up quietly through a foundation his company already used for local community giving, so it would never feel, to Maria or to Sophia, like a personal handout from a grateful employer. Alongside it, a raise for Maria that reflected, finally, something closer to what 11 years of quiet excellence had actually been worth, along with full health benefits. Daniel realized, to his own quiet shame, he had simply never thought to offer before. Maria cried when she saw it. Not the practiced tears Vanessa had once used like a tool, but real ones, the kind that come rarely and mean everything when they finally arrive. "You don't have to keep thanking me," she said through them. "I'm not thanking you for what happened with Vanessa," Daniel said gently. "I'm finishing what my mother started. You just happened to remind me why it mattered." But even as this quieter, warmer chapter of the story began to unfold, one more piece of the Vanessa case was still waiting to resolve itself, and it would bring Maria and Daniel back together in a courtroom, facing the woman who had nearly taken everything one final time. The trial date arrived 9 months after that chaotic evening on the quiet street in Pasadena, longer than anyone expected, delayed twice by legal motions Vanessa's court-appointed attorney filed in increasingly desperate attempts to have the charges reduced or dismissed. Daniel had spent those 9 months slowly rebuilding, not just his finances, which had never actually been drained thanks to how quickly everything unraveled, but something less tangible, something closer to his own sense of judgment, his own trust in his ability to read people. He'd started therapy, quietly, something he never would have considered before, working through not just the immediate shock of what happened, but the deeper question underneath it. How had he missed it for 18 months? His therapist, a calm, practical woman named Dr. Ferris, offered him an answer he carried with him long after their sessions ended. People who are good and hardworking often assume everyone operates from the same honest place they do. It's not a weakness, Daniel. It's just something con artists specifically learn to exploit. The fact that you were fooled says more about her skill at deception than your judgment. It helped. Slowly. Maria, meanwhile, had watched Sophia walk across a small stage that spring in a cap and gown, tears streaming down both their faces as her daughter's name was called, not just as a nursing graduate, but as one of 3 students in her cohort selected for a competitive pediatric residency placement at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, the exact position she'd dreamed about since she was a girl. Daniel had attended the ceremony, sitting quietly in the back with Elena Ramirez, who had become something like a family friend to both households since the day she'd blocked a runaway fiancé with her SUV. The trial itself was, in the end, shorter than anyone expected. The evidence Maria had documented, dates, times, the folder she'd photographed in secret weeks before the wedding, combined with the financial records Daniel's legal team compiled, and the discovery of Vanessa's 2 prior similar schemes in other states, left very little room for her defense to maneuver. Marcus, eventually located and extradited from Nevada, took a plea deal in exchange for testifying against Vanessa, describing in flat, unemotional detail exactly how their partnership worked, how they'd chosen Daniel specifically after researching his company's public financial filings, how they'd rehearsed the old-fashioned love backstory together before Vanessa ever approached him at that charity gala. Daniel sat in the courtroom gallery on the day of Vanessa's sentencing, Maria beside him. He had asked her to come, and she had agreed without hesitation, understanding somehow that he needed someone from that terrible evening beside him to close the loop properly. When Vanessa was finally brought in, thinner than Daniel remembered, dressed in a plain gray jumpsuit instead of blue silk, she looked at him only once, briefly, across the courtroom. There was no apology in her eyes.
No softness.
Just a flicker of something that might have been resentment, or might simply have been the exhaustion of a plan that had finally, fully collapsed. The judge sentenced her to 4 years, with the possibility of parole after 2.5, along with a restitution order covering the deposits and losses from Daniel's case, as well as partial restitution for the previous victims in Arizona and Texas, wherever it could still be recovered. It wasn't everything. It rarely is in cases like this. But it was accountability, and after 9 long months, accountability felt like enough. Outside the courthouse, standing in the bright California sunlight, Daniel exhaled a breath he felt like he'd been holding for the better part of a year. "It's really over," he said quietly. "It's really over," Maria agreed. He turned to her, the woman who had once been invisible in his own home, who was now, in every way that mattered, one of the most important people in his life. "Can I ask you something, Maria? Honestly?" "Of course." "Do you think I'll ever trust someone again? The way I trusted her, I mean fully, without watching for the trap?" Maria considered the question with the same careful thoughtfulness she brought to everything. "I think," she said slowly, "that trust isn't something you should try to feel exactly the way you did before. That version of trust didn't have any wisdom in it. It was just hope, dressed up as certainty. What you build next should have both. Hope and eyes wide open. That's not a weaker kind of trust, Daniel. It's actually a stronger one." Daniel thought about that for a long time on the drive home, and in the months that followed, as life in that hillside house slowly, quietly, found a new and steadier rhythm. 2 years passed. The house on the hill looked different now, not renovated in any dramatic way, but lived in differently. Daniel had finally done the kitchen remodel he'd been putting off, choosing warm wood tones his mother would have loved, and framed photographs now lined the hallway that had once been mostly bare. His mother, his father who'd passed when Daniel was young, and a newer photograph too. Daniel, Maria, and Sophia, taken at Sophia's hospital pinning ceremony the year she officially became a full pediatric nurse. All 3 of them laughing at something just out of frame. Daniel's company had grown further in those 2 years, expanding into 2 additional states, and he'd finally, cautiously, begun dating again. Nothing serious yet, but something honest, something built slowly instead of arriving fully formed and convenient the way Vanessa once had. He'd learned to notice things now. Small inconsistencies. The difference between someone being kind because it was who they were and someone being kind because it served a purpose. Maria still arrived every morning at 6, though these days it was less because the job required it and more because 11, now 13, years of routine had become something closer to home for her too. She'd turned down Daniel's gentle suggestion, twice, that she consider retiring early on a generous pension he offered to set up for her, not because she needed the money any less, but because, as she told him plainly one morning over coffee, "I like my life the way it is, Mr. Whitfield. I don't want you to fix something that isn't broken just because you feel like you should." Daniel had laughed, really laughed, in a way that had become easier again over those 2 years. "Fair enough. But you have to stop calling me Mr. Whitfield eventually." "I'll consider it," Maria said, the same way she'd said it for 13 years, and they both understood by now that she never would, and that this small, stubborn formality had become its own quiet joke between them, a way of honoring the boundaries that had somehow made room for something even deeper to grow within them. It was on an ordinary Tuesday evening, oddly similar in its ordinariness to the one 2 years earlier that changed everything, that Daniel found himself standing in the kitchen doorway watching Maria wipe down the counters, the golden evening light coming through the windows the same way it always did at that hour. "Maria," he said, "can I tell you something my therapist helped me understand a while back?" She turned, drying her hands on a towel. "Of course. She told me once that the people who save us aren't always the ones we expect. Sometimes they're standing right in front of us the whole time, and we're just too distracted or too comfortable or too in love with the wrong idea to actually see them." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I think about that a lot. About how close I came to losing everything, and how the person who stopped it wasn't someone with more power than me, or more money, or a fancier title. It was someone who simply cared enough to pay attention when everyone else, including me, wasn't paying attention at all." Maria was quiet for a moment, the towel still in her hands. "You give me too much credit," she said softly. "I just did what felt right." "That's exactly my point," Daniel said. "Most people, when doing the right thing is inconvenient or risky or not technically their responsibility, choose not to do it anyway. You didn't. You ran down a street after a woman twice as fast as you, in your work shoes, for a family that, at the time, hadn't done nearly enough to earn that kind of loyalty from you. I think about that almost every day." Maria smiled, the kind of small, genuine smile that had become more frequent over the past 2 years. "Your mother taught me something a long time ago, in a stairwell, of all places. She taught me that the size of the moment doesn't matter nearly as much as the choice you make inside it. I've just tried to live like that ever since." Daniel nodded slowly, and in that quiet kitchen, 13 years and 2 lifetimes of change later, he finally understood something he wished he'd understood far sooner, that the most important people in our lives are rarely the ones who arrive with the loudest introductions. Sometimes, they're the ones who've been there all along, quietly making coffee every morning, quietly noticing everything, quietly waiting for the moment they're needed most. If you ever visit Daniel Whitfield's company today, you'll find something unusual pinned to the wall of the employee break room, right next to the standard HR notices and the coffee machine instructions. It's a simple handwritten sign, framed, that reads, "Pay attention to the people everyone else overlooks. They are often the ones who will save you." Daniel put it there himself, 3 years after that evening on the quiet street in Pasadena, and he's told the story behind it to every new employee who's ever asked, because he believes, deeply now, that it matters more than almost anything else he could teach them about running a business. Maria still works in that house on the hill, 13 years now, stretching toward 14, though these days her role looks a little different. She oversees the small household staff Daniel eventually hired to help as the property expanded, and she still, stubbornly, makes the coffee herself every single morning because some things, she says, a person should never fully hand off to someone else. Sophia is a senior pediatric nurse now at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, the position she dreamed of since she was a little girl watching kind nurses care for her sick cousin, and she credits her mother, endlessly, in every interview and every award ceremony, for teaching her that quiet, patient hard work is never wasted, even when no one seems to be watching. And Daniel eventually did fall in love again, 2.5 years after that terrible, clarifying evening with a woman named Grace, a pediatric surgeon he met, fittingly, at a hospital fundraiser Sophia had invited them both to. Their relationship grew slowly, carefully, built on the kind of trust Maria had once described to him, hope and eyes wide open, both at once. Maria was there, of course, at their small backyard wedding 2 years later, standing not in the kitchen this time, but seated in the front row of family and closest friends, exactly where Daniel insisted she belonged. This story, at its heart, isn't really about a runaway fiancé or stolen money, or even a dramatic chase down a quiet suburban street. It's about the quiet, unglamorous power of loyalty, the kind that shows up early every morning without being asked, that notices small inconsistencies nobody else bothers to see, that runs toward trouble instead of away from it, simply because it's the right thing to do. It's a reminder that the people we sometimes overlook, the ones who serve us coffee, who clean our homes, who stand quietly in the background of our busy, important lives, often see us more clearly than anyone else ever will. If there's one thing to carry with you from Daniel and Maria's story, let it be this: kindness given without any expectation of return has a way of finding its way back to you, sometimes years later, in the exact moment you need it most. And the people who show up for us in our hardest moments deserve to be seen, valued, and thanked, not just once, in a crisis, but every single ordinary day that follows it. If this story moved you even a little, please take a moment to hit that like button. It truly helps this channel more than you know. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing, because we bring you a brand new emotional story just like this one every single week. If you know someone who needs a reminder today that good people, quiet loyalty, and honest hard work still matter in this world, please share this story with them. You never know whose day, or whose life, it might genuinely touch. Thank you so much for watching until the very end. Until next time, take care of the people around you, and don't forget to notice the ones who are quietly taking care of you.